I am anti-SMART goals. Hello, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today, I am here to talk about goal timelines and how do you pick them? Do you set them? Pros, cons, all of the things about goal timelines and setting an end date for your specific goals. You've heard me talk about this before, but I don't really believe in SMART goals. The acronym that we have been taught our entire lives on how to set goals. Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. That is what we have been learning our entire lives on how to set our goals. And there are just some aspects of that I disagree with, that I think hurts us more than it helps us. Now, there are some pieces of the SMART goal acronym that I think are helpful, but there are some that I don't think that it's helping you. The M stands for measurable. I don't think that every goal has to be measurable. I don't think you need a number attached to every goal that you set. I am not gonna talk about that today though. If you want a separate video on measurable, setting numerical goals, when to do it, when not to do it, let me know down in the comments and I will make a whole separate video on measurable. Today, we're talking about timelines, or T, which stands for time bound. And the SMART goal acronym encourages you to set an end date for any goal that you set. Especially this time of year, it is so common, myself included, for us to set goals that we say we're going to accomplish this by the end of the year. We are setting a timeline on our specific goal. And sometimes that can be really helpful. It can be really motivating. It can give you something to work towards, but sometimes it has the opposite effect and you are less likely to accomplish that goal. When we set really specific goals with really specific timelines, we are ultimately setting ourselves up for failure because life happens and we don't know what is going to show up in our day-to-day lives or in the outside world that's outside of our control. Sometimes it's a global pandemic, but most of the time it's just life and things pop up that are out of your control, and that specific goal you set with that specific timeline and maybe you had this perfect specific plan no longer applies. So in this video, I'm gonna give you 5 things to think about. I wouldn't necessarily call them tips. Some of them are questions, some of them are ideas, but 5 things to think about when you are deciding on your goals as it relates to setting a timeline. And if by the end of this video, you're like, maybe some of my yearly goals aren't the best setup for me and my personal motivation, you can change them. You have the permission to change whatever it is about your goals. I don't care that it is not even the end of January. If there is something about your annual goals that no longer suits you, you are welcome to change your mind and keep going. We have the entire year ahead of us. There is so much progress to be made on all of our goals. So think about your annual goals and the timelines that you set as I go through these 5 ideas. So the first thing I want you to do is break that goal down that you set for the entire year and see if it feels reasonable. Some of these are going to be easier to do than others, right? Going back to the numerical goals. If you do have a numerical goal, one of the pros is that it's easy to break down. Let's take reading, for example. A lot of people will set reading goals. I want to read X number of books by the end of the year. By the way, if you're somebody who doesn't want to set reading goals, also totally fine. One number I see pop up a lot is 50 or 52. I want to read 1 book a week for the entire year. So let's say that's your goal, to read 52 books by the end of the year, which is approximately 1 book a week. Now, the average book length is anywhere from 300 to 400 pages. You might choose books that are much longer. Maybe you're reading a lot of Stephen King. You might choose books that are much shorter. But for easy math, we're going to use 350 pages as our average book because that equates to 50 pages per day. Okay, so if you want to read 52 books a year, that's about 50 pages per day if you're trying to read every single day. Based on the average reading speed, that is going to take you about an hour, and that's actually generous. Those are typically, they say a normal reading speed is about 40 pages an hour. Again, depending on the size of the page, the font size, all those things. But let's say, again, for easy math, 50 pages is an hour of reading per day. Is that reasonable? In your schedule, given your other commitments, is reading an hour a day feasible in your life? If the answer is yes, awesome. Then 52 books a year sounds great for you. If you hear that and you're like, oh my gosh, there's no way I could read an hour a day every day. Now, I get that maybe you might read a little bit more on vacation or a little bit more on the weekends, but if you cannot foresee yourself averaging to an hour a day for a year, then 52 books is not a reasonable goal for you. And lowering that goal is likely going to be more beneficial to you because it's going to be a more reasonable goal. Now, the goals that are not numerical, it's obviously going to be harder to break those down and figure out, is it reasonable for me to get this done in a year? But I would encourage you to start that process. Start breaking it down, start thinking about what are the steps that I need to take to accomplish that goal, approximately how long are these steps going to take, and can I fit that into my schedule? And if the answer is yes, awesome. then that goal is reasonable within your year timeline. And if not, then you have two options. Option one is to change the goal. Make the goal a little bit less of a time commitment, shorten it, and keep the same timeline. Option two is to extend the timeline and know that you're not going to finish it by the end of the year, and you might have to carry it over to next year, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Idea number two is really a question to ask yourself about your overarching goals. And you may not know the answer to this right now, especially if you're brand new to goal setting. This might not be something that you felt one way or the other, but think about in the past, when you've set goals in the past or resolutions in the past. How will this impact my motivation? Will I get unmotivated if I realize at some point that I'm not, or even that I'm going to way surpass this goal? I listened to a podcast recently from John Acuff, which I highly recommend his podcast, and he talks about this line. There's a horizontal line from easy to overwhelm, and your goal needs to lie somewhere in the middle of that line, somewhere from easy to overwhelm. It inspires you, it's exciting for you, it's not too easy, but it's not too overwhelming, and this question can really help you think about that. For example, I had a one-on-one client who set a workout goal that she was going to do a certain number of classes. She takes in-person workout classes over the course of the calendar year. And when it was kind of May or June rolled around and she was behind, and she was so behind that she realized that she would have to take like 5 or 6 classes a week for the rest of the year in order to hit that goal. And that was no longer reasonable. And so you know what she did? She gave up. And she was like, well, I'm not gonna hit that overarching goal, so I'm just not gonna work on that goal anymore. And she stopped going to workout classes. As you can imagine, she did not feel great about that. And by setting this really specific goal within a timeline that maybe in January when she set it felt reasonable, she got unmotivated when she realized she was not going to hit it. And so she gave up completely. If that is something that you've experienced in the past, or you know that that's how you operate, if you get halfway and you're not halfway on that goal and you're gonna give up halfway, then don't put a timeline on it. Let that goal be open-ended. Say, give yourself another reward at the end. When I get to this certain number of workout classes, I'm gonna reward myself, even if it takes me 2 years or 3 years to get there. Something that's gonna keep you going. It also could happen the other way. If you set a specific goal and say, I'm gonna get to this by the end of the year, and you get to that halfway mark and you are way past halfway, you could realize, oh, well then I can just take it easy for the rest of the year. And maybe that is what you want, right? Maybe in the second half of the year, you're gonna focus on a different goal and pivot your attention. That's a great option. But maybe it's something you want to consistently do throughout the year and you were a little easy on yourself in setting that goal. That's when setting that year timeline on that goal becomes detrimental. So if you find that tracking your progress on a goal like that is going to impact your motivation when you reach different milestones along the way, then let go of that timeline. Idea number 3, or suggestion number 3, if you've listened to what I've said so far and you're like, yeah, that's me, is to set shorter, more specific goals. I want you to imagine a graph that has timeline on one axis and specificity on the other axis. The further we get out on the graph in terms of timeline, the less specific that we get to make our goals, because so many more things are unpredictable. So if you like setting timelines on your goals, great. Let's set shorter timelines, and then we can be a little bit more specific. This is one of the reasons that I love quarterly goals. In fact, I did a whole separate video on my Q1 quarterly goals and how I'm kind of approaching them a little bit differently this year, where some of them are focuses, but some of them are milestones. So instead of saying, I'm gonna get to this by the end of the year, my end of the year goal is a little bit more vague, but my quarterly goal is more specific, because I can, to the best of my abilities with what I know now, more accurately predict what I can accomplish in the first 3 months of the year, not knowing what's gonna happen for the rest of the year. So setting shorter goals that are more specific, so you still get that specificity, that timeline that you really want, but you're not setting yourself up for failure by setting a timeline that is much, much longer. Which leads me to idea number 4, and that is just to let it be vague. If you want to set your goal on an annual timeline, which is what I do, I pick pretty vague goals for my annual goals. I know that I have no idea what's gonna happen in the next 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. So for my annual goals, I'm gonna pick things that I'm gonna focus on, but the description of the annual goal is going to be relatively vague because I don't wanna set myself up for failure by not accomplishing something by the end of the year. What this might mean, if you are going to be vague like this, is that you're carrying goals over from year to year. And I want to remind you that if you are carrying a goal over from one year to the next, that does not mean that you have failed. It just means that that goal is going to take you more than 1 year to accomplish. And that is totally normal. There are so many goals in our lives that we think, well, it's a new year, so I'm going to set this goal and I'm going to finish it in a year. There are some goals that are just going to take you more than 1 year to accomplish. And just because it's vague and you're carrying it over from year to year doesn't mean that you can't make progress along the way. Last year in 2021, I set a goal to lose weight. I did not put a number on it. I did not say I want to get this percentage. I had nothing. I had no expectations in my head of where I was going to be at the end of the year. And I'm not gonna share the number with you. I talked about why in my 2021 goals recap video, but what I am gonna tell you is that I'm really proud of the progress that I made, even though I didn't finish the goal. I didn't get to where I want to be. So I carried that goal over into 2022. It's very possible that I finished this goal this year in 2022. It is possible, but I still left it vague. I still did not put that timeline pressure on this goal to say that I'm gonna get to that final finish line at the end of 2022, because something else might pop up. Something might happen in my life or our lives that impacts that goal. And at the end of the year, I wanna feel great. I want to feel proud. I want to feel accomplished. And by being vague with my yearly goals, I'm able to feel that at the end of the year, which gives me that boost to go into the next year. If you set up all of your goals at the beginning of the year to be specific on this annual timeline, and you get to the end of the year and you didn't accomplish them, you are likely going to be feeling defeated and frustrated and unsuccessful. And that is not the energy we want to bring when it comes to setting our new goals for the next year. If you watch that 2021 goals recap video, I was incredibly proud of the progress I made on 5 of my 6 goals. Not perfect. There was one of my goals that I really did not make a lot of progress on last year, and that is okay. But the other 5 were awesome. And I was incredibly proud of the progress that I made, and they were all incredibly vague. So let it be vague. If you've never tried setting a vague goal like that, give it a try and see if it works for you. And the last thing I want to talk about in this video is a reminder that you can have a plan without having a timeline. There is a really popular quote related to goals. A dream is just a dream. A goal is a dream with a plan and a deadline. Harvey Mackay. I don't know if he actually said this quote. I found lots of people that were equated to some form of this quote, but I disagree. I disagree with this quote. I don't think that you need a deadline for every goal that you set. I do think you need a plan. You need to break it down and you need to have action steps, and you can have a plan without having a set deadline. You can have the steps that you're gonna take, and maybe you map it out. And in a perfect world, or in a world where nothing pops up unexpectedly, you could do all of those things and hit it by the end of the year. But how often is it that something pops up, whether it's day to day or month to month, that we weren't expecting, that takes time away from ourselves and our goals? So map it out, have a plan, but be flexible on the timeline. And don't pressure yourself to get the entire plan for the entire goal done by the end. Now, if you want to set little deadlines along the way, I'm here for it. I'm here for saying, I'm going to do this by the end of Q1, like we talked about, setting quarterly goals. I'm going to do this by the end of the month. I set monthly action steps every single month on my channel, but those timelines are much shorter. So I'm setting deadlines that are so much shorter and so much more feasible and reasonable with what I know now, whereas these annual timelines, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? So those are my thoughts on why I think that setting specific goals on specific timelines is usually going to hurt us more than it's going to help us. If you need some additional support in this area, you're not quite sure how to word your goal, if it's too vague, is it vague enough, what's the timeline, join our Patreon goal setting community, share your yearly goals in our Facebook group, and I will look at them. I will give you my thoughts, and all of the community members are so supportive, and a lot of them have goals that are likely similar to yours and can give you, this is what I did, or this is what I am doing, and that supportive community will help you figure out what goals are gonna work for you this year. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new here, please click that subscribe button. I upload new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday focused on helping you achieve your goals. Thank you so much for watching. Attainable, what is the R? That is gonna be a little loud. I'm not gonna say that line.